Hi everyone, my name is Philip Seibel, and I'm a survivor of the horrific sex cult, also known as the Children of God. I never met my actual father, my biological father. My mother was in the cult already when I was born. She met my adoptive father in the cult about a year after I was born. Then after that, they moved to India. The first actual commune memories I have, ground floor, old villa, colonial type housing like you have all over Asia. The reason that they separated us kids was the ideology back then, or still is, that we are all one in Christ. So there is no such thing as ownership, privacy. As a kid, I had to address all the adults as auntie and uncle. All the adults were allowed to discipline me, to treat me in any way they deemed fit. Often, I also, I did not see my biological mother for sometimes 4 years. My whole childhood was just living nightmare, trying to just be as unnoticeable as possible. The purpose or the philosophy of the Children of God is, I guess, very complex, but also very simply explained. And the simple matter of fact is David Burke, the founder of the Children of God, was a sexual predator, a pervert, who used his influence and abused the hippie generation to come up with this sick mixture of free love, while at the same time, so you can go to heaven, be saved, be born again, and still have with children and all you want, and women, and also using all the patriarchal misogynistic stuff in the Bible to enslave women in the cult to do his bidding and the bidding of other men. So women had to subjugate themselves to men, women had less say than men did, women had to service men everything. They had no say. So if a man came up to a woman in the cult and said, I would like to have sex with you, you had to. And if you didn't, you were not spiritual, you were not giving, you were selfish. There were actual cases where adult women were chastised publicly for refusing advances of other males in the cult. In the cult, the definition of a woman was at the age of 12. So just to put that into perspective, a 12-year-old girl not wanting to sleep with an adult man would result in public retribution, in worst cases even excommunication. My case is a bit special because my stepfather, what he did to me was not really the norm. I remember one of the first arguments that I understood my parents having is my father, he was molesting me. My mother came in and saw it, and then she was like, ew, that's disgusting, what are you doing? And then he's like, oh, I'm making love to my son like the prophet told us to. She was like, yeah, I don't think that's what the prophet meant when he said we should with our children. It's not like she was innocent either. They would get me into bed every night and try to have sex with me and make me participate in their activities. I was growing up thinking that I hated it. For me it was weird and I didn't want to, but I just thought yeah, I guess parents do that with their kids, you know? It took me decades to actually register how badly I was abused. My parents always, every day, I love you, Philip. You're going to be such a big, strong, beautiful boy when you grow up. And even after my stepdad would whip me, he'd be he'd pull my pants back up and then he'd hug me and be like, yeah, I'm only doing this because I love you and because I want you to be a strong soldier of the end time of Jesus. If I wouldn't punish you, that means I wouldn't love you, because that means I wouldn't want you to grow up to be a strong adult. When you have that very extremely sick definition of love growing up, which isn't love obviously, then it's definitely does mess you up. I know of ex-cult members who to this day also spank their children because that's what they learned in the cult. I had no childhood, I had no teenage years. I worked from the moment I can remember until now. I was literally robbed of my entire childhood and also as an adult of any chance of having a normal existence, because as of this day I still don't have an education, a degree. I never finished an apprenticeship because I ran away when I was 15 and all I knew was to sing and play guitar and perform. If you're young and motivated, you can do that. And I mean, for a moment I was also even quite successful at it. I mean, I was traveling around Europe and singing in all these cool places and staying in cool hotels. At some point it starts to you up, because then you're like, yeah, I've also done this as a child and was forced to do it. And then like memories start coming back. Maybe you get depressed or sick, or, and then you go from being a rock star one day to basically being, and I ended up like going through such a severe depression that I just left everything, and I was homeless on the beaches of South Spain for almost a year, and I just refused to do anything. I was just, yeah, I had my guitar with me, and then later I had a dog just walked up to me, and then it was my dog. And yeah, and then doggy and me and my guitar, and yeah, I would just basically play enough, just barely enough, so I could buy like some hashish and some dog food. In the evenings, I dig underneath one of these like fisherman boats underneath the sand, and then go and sleep, and the dog would be like outside guarding. The kind of stuff we went through as kids, it doesn't surprise me why so many of us, especially at my age now, between the age of like 30, 40, that a lot of us start killing ourselves, because just like you could get to this point where you just realize how robbed you are, and that you'll never have a normal life, even no matter how hard you try. For me, it was like that too. I nearly committed suicide at the age of 30. I survived. Later in life, I confronted my parents, actually because I wanted to make a criminal case against them. So I invited them to my home in Switzerland under the pretext that I hadn't seen them in like 10 years. So it was the pretext of like, yeah, live and let live, forget it's in the past, whatever. I taped a phone underneath the table and had it on record. I got a nice and good, lots of wine, fondue, then confronted them about it. And Stephen, my stepfather, he just looked me straight in the eye. He's like, I don't like where this conversation is going. You need to shut this down right now. Otherwise we're leaving. And if you want to make stupid accusations like that, then you can talk to my lawyer. And then he got mad and left the room. And then my mother said something which really creeped me out. She's like, yeah, Phil, we still like practice like free love and all that, and I mean, we used to have nice times when you were a kid, and now you're so big and beautiful and strong and such broad shoulders and everything. So if you have anything you need me to look after, then you just let me know. I'm up for it. And I was just like, what, man? My own mother hitting on me in my own house, like basically saying, oh yeah, she'd want to have sex with me. I was just like, I'm not hearing this, right? I mean, like I'm imagining this, right? I remember once, it must have been about 12. As usual, we're too broke to like go eat out anywhere, even though we're making all this money for the call, but they were too like stingy to buy us a pizza for lunch or something like that. So we're sitting on top of this like graveyard wall eating like these salami sticks and bread. And then she just looks over at me and she's like, if I was your age, would you find me attractive? And I'm like, no, you're not my type at all. Like, I like little cute blonde chicks with blue eyes, and you're anything but that, so no. And then she actually got up and was crying and just f***ed off, And then Steven came over and slapped me across the face. And he's like, how dare you insult your mother and call her ugly? It's like, I didn't call her ugly. I just said I'm not into her. You're like, what the people, Aside from the sexual abuse growing up, worst experience I have that I still vividly remember was being incarcerated in this room and having this exorcism done on me for like over 8 hours. I also talk about that in my book. The long story short, I was 13. I'd already told my parents I don't want to be in the cult anymore, and they were trying to figure out what to do. And they told me as long as I behave and don't speak my doubts and my poison to other children, that I could still at least take part of the day-to-day activities. But if they would catch me like spreading poison and lies and whatever, then I would have to go into isolation. And I knew what that meant, so of course I was like, yeah, I do suffer from PTSD. I have been diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, borderline. Oh, and I'm dyslexic as well. My PTSD hits me not so much anymore, but when it does, it's usually, it hits me in the way of like, I feel like suffocating, like I can't breathe all of a sudden. Everything I'm doing in my life is absolutely pointless, that if I drop dead right now, it would be, there would be exactly the same meaning as existing. I do sometimes, like, I have PTSD moments when I'm like washing dishes by hand, and then I get like flashbacks to like older kids grabbing me by my hair and like trying to drown me in the slop wash. Because I mean, it was also other kids that tortured you as well. Like if you were a younger kid, pubescent 10, 11, 12-year-old, the 15, 16, 17-year-olds, they tortured the shit out of me. Because I mean, they were getting beaten by the adults. I was getting beaten by everybody, Most of the coping I did was just fleeing into my own little world. And I was very good at that. Like, I still do. I got arrested earlier this year because the police found something I posted on Facebook and they misinterpreted it as a threat against my parents. So they came really heavy-handed with drawn guns and everything because they accused me of wanting to go to Germany to kill my parents. And I didn't say that with one word in anything I wrote. And then I was in this holding cell for quite a few hours. When I was in the cult, in this incarceration, I was actually, the end of the story that I said before about this whole exorcism thing, the end of that story is I remained in that room for like almost 2 months as a 13-year-old. You can kind of imagine what something like that does to you as a person. Under Geneva Convention, that's torture, to put somebody in isolation without light, without, access to sanitary and whatever. What I went through in the cult, in my opinion, in war would be a war crime, would be a crime against humanity. But we don't have laws to protect civil people, especially children, from atrocities like that, because I don't think lawmakers even can fathom that people are capable of such horrific deeds. My coping mechanisms in the cult were mostly just going into myself and like going into my own world. In my own world, I would usually be like living out in a forest somewhere, running away from the Antichrist, imagining how I would build my own little tree house, how I'd make like friends with all the animals in the forest, and ideally, of course, I would have a nice, pretty girl with me, and I'd make up all these fantastic adventures, stories. I think that's also what makes me, as an adult, a decent speaker and a decent writer, is because we didn't have anything growing up. So if you weren't doing chores, what could you do as a kid? I mean, we weren't allowed to like listen to music that wasn't the cult. We weren't allowed to watch movies, no television. So you could like draw something. You could write a story or a poem. Yeah, or you could just spend hours staring into the ceiling, coming up with whatever. So already from a very early age, I was like drawing pictures, writing little short stories about animals in the forest and being nice to each other. And of course, all that had like, super Christian morals, because it had to, otherwise you get into trouble. My parents or some adult would like read one of the stories and it didn't say like Jesus in at least every second paragraph, to be like, yeah, dude, you need to put more Jesus in here. It's lacking Jesus. Like, what, you don't like Jesus or something? It's just like, oh, sake, man, it's the story of a rabbit and a bear. What's Jesus got to do with it, When I was singled out for abuse, this could be so random. Like, you could literally be minding your own business, like what I said before, like you're washing dishes, some teenager grabs you by your hair, just puts your head underwater, has fun watching you struggle until you stop moving, and then once or twice I nearly actually inhaled the water because they kept me under so long that I mean a millisecond later I would have died. Or I was taking like fish sticks out of an oven and some other teenager just walked up and just slammed the oven door on my wrists, and I just got like third-degree burns on my both arms, and I was screaming and screaming and screaming. And you would think that like any normal parent would bring their kid to a hospital, right, if something like that would happen. No fucking way. I think they even like got a stick from the garden, wrapped it around in some cloth, gave it to me to bite on, and sent me to my room. I was very lucky to be a boy in the cult, because the girls, they were really just abused and raped by all. There were cases of adult men raping and abusing boys. I was molested by one other man other than my stepfather, which I won't necessarily go into because it's not really important. But what I want to say is that I think that's also one of the reasons that me as a guy, it's much easier to speak out about the atrocities that went on in this cult, because most of the girls, like, I don't know, I guess if you're like 6-7 years old and you get like raped by every adult man in the cult and forced to have sharing nights and you don't want that shit ever coming out, because then, I mean, I think as a woman that just completely destroys you and your self-worth, and like you don't want, like, if you fall in love with a dude and you're out of the cult, and then all of a sudden the dude knows that you're basically passed around and by everybody. Yeah, I can imagine that's also for a guy not easy to accept that his woman went through that kind of stuff. And I used to also, like, for many years, like, always associate my sexuality with my being a man, so being sexually abused is like losing a part of your manliness or whatever. And now, of course, at my age, I know that's just I've heard really things too. Like, ever since I came out, I've had people writing me, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself, making up all these lies about your father, and I'm sure you just, you secretly just had a thing for him, or you're sick, to even imagine that, like homosexual thing, and blaming your homosexuality on your father, and or like, oh yeah, you're only making up these things because you're a loser and you have no way to make money, so you're like an internet beggar. Or other people saying like, it's good you're about to go to heaven, because then you can apologize to God in purpose for all the lies in person, for all the lies you're spreading about us and whatever. To this day, I'm still a very mixed up individual. I try to stay positive. It's not always easy at times. Like I said, when I was 15, 16, 17, I was, a homeless street musician. I remained kind of in that kind of weird limbo state for many decades, where I was neither fish nor bird, as they say in German, or just doing whatever I can to survive and trying not to think too much about it. And in a weird way, ever since I became an activist, I found a little bit of like my own identity again. Like, that's what I do now. I'm an activist. I try to get the laws changed. I tell my story. I mean, yeah, if people want to accuse me of trying to profit from my story, it's like, well, would you like to change with me? Like, I get your nice loving parents and house and childhood, and you get to live through all the I did. At the end of the day, you have to kind of market what you can and what and that's what I do. I'm a musician, I'm an activist, I'm a speaker, and as messed up as I am on the inside, I can at least maybe find some purpose and some balance to that by openly speaking about it, and by also maybe encouraging other victims to do likewise, because I think that as a whole, stuff that happened to me, that's not just isolated incidents. Like, that happens everywhere in the world even now. Forced child slavery, child sex trafficking, all of that. And I mean, I was very lucky to be a boy in the cult. The shit that girls went through in the cult, man, I mean, I don't even want to think about shit like that. Like, I got molested a little here and there, and I mean, my stepfather also did rape me when I was very small, but for me, those weren't the worst memories, to be honest. The worst memories was just the whole life, like feeling like you're never going to escape this day-to-day horror, this feeling like you have no say, you're not allowed to have any kind of personal opinion, personal belongings. If you fall in love with a girl and she gets by every other adult, yeah, tough luck, And I think also that was one of the things that really hurt me the most. Like, you just couldn't have anything. As soon as you liked someone, or you like got something that you preferred, and an adult would see that, be like, oh, no, give that to me. When I was like 12, 13 years old, and I was like madly in love with this girl, and then my stepfather was just like forcing her to share with him, Shit like that just really fucks you up, Yeah, of course. And you have like issues of abandonment and fear of abandonment, loneliness, the feeling like no matter where you are, like I have a brilliant life, actually. Like, I have all the guitars, music equipment. I live luxuriously, but I still always have the feeling that I'm a loser. I shouldn't be here, that like I should be traveling, or should be, because like, yeah, as a kid, I was just uprooted all the time. So as soon as we were like in one community, and then the police would raid it, and we'd have to move in the middle of the night, and you make some friends, and then you never see them again. There's like so much messed up stuff that I will be dealing with the aftermath of that as long as I breathe. Maybe in a weird way, putting that into context, telling people like how it was like, is like the only thing that kind of gives me clarity and gives me a little bit of satisfaction to all that mess, so that it makes it also so that it actually happened. When you talk about it, it makes it real. As long as you just keep it in your head, then you're always doubting it, then you're always like, yeah, did that actually happen, or am I just like, like that should never go forgotten. My wife is not actually the mother of my kids. I have 3 kids from 2 different women. Funny how history repeats itself. I actually always swore to myself that I would never do shit like that. Like, I'd find one nice woman, marry her, make some kids, white picket fence, house, car. But of course, with my background, that was never going to happen. When I got the first woman pregnant who wanted to keep the kid, I stuck around in Switzerland because I swore to myself that I would not put a child in this world that didn't know who their father was, like what happened to me. And then maybe they have the bad luck of them growing up with some other stepfather or pervert that abuses. And so I stuck around in Switzerland when I became a father. And yeah, she didn't want the kid, the mother. Well, I mean, she wanted it, but then when it was there, then she abandoned it with me, basically. And I became a stay-at-home dad. And then I met this other woman who I hired at the beginning to watch my kids so I could like do concerts and go work and stuff like that. And then I got her pregnant. And I mean, we were engaged and everything, and then she turned out to be, yeah, whack. Anyway, long story. Then all of a sudden I ended up with these 3 kids. And yeah, now I'm married to an absolutely wonderful woman. We got married in 2013, so 10 years. And we're raising my 3 kids together, and she works as a nurse. A month ago, I was stationary in psychiatry I had a really, really bad nervous breakdown. Like, I couldn't talk anymore. My brain just shut down. And then, yeah, I was stationary for 3 weeks. But my kids and my wife, they're absolutely supportive. You know, it was nice taking it day by day at the moment.